Hey, how you doing? I'm super late. I really do apologize for that, but I just had to get my hair cut. Now I got about 3 or 4 of them left, so I'm a happy guy. This is Through the Week, folks. Tuesday edition. Yes. I'm so glad that you're with us. I'm Terry Jensen. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church here in Plano, Illinois. Don't know if I remembered to say that or not. Getting old, forget stuff, all that. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about something that happens when we, I don't know, when we start to become too big for our britches. This is a quote from Emil Brunner. And, let's just listen to what he has to say, okay? The more that a man is able to distinguish himself from the rest of creation, the more he becomes conscious of himself as subject, as an I, to whom the whole world is object. The more, the more does he tend to confuse himself with God, to confuse his spirit with the Spirit of God. The more that a man is able to distinguish himself from the rest of creation. What does he mean by that? Well, basically, he's talking about the bigger we get, the smarter we get, the more technology we create, the more inventions and the more advanced that we think we become. And through those advancements, we begin to see ourselves as becoming separate from the rest of creation. In other words, we think we're better than them. And sometimes it moves in a drift to where we think we're better than even those of our own species. Other human beings, we think that we're better than them. Maybe they just don't have enough money, or maybe they drive the wrong car. Quite possibly, they have a different complexion, or they eat food that we think is funky. Yep. As a matter of fact, story. When I was first married, um, we moved in with my mom and dad for just a little bit of time. Somehow, my mom and my wife got the idea that it would be really great to find a house and live together. We'd have our section of the house, they'd have their section of the house, and everything would be hunky dory. My dad and I, on the other hand, kind of looked at each other sideways and went, "Oh, this just doesn't sound good to me." So, bottom line was, my mom's Japanese, or she was Japanese, and my wife just couldn't stand the smell of Japanese food, and she just complained about it. She's she doesn't like the way fish smells, number one. So my mother went out and bought a refrigerator just so she could keep her food, and she kept it out in the garage. Didn't say a word about it, just got the refrigerator, cleaned out the one in the kitchen. But sometimes when we're confronted with stuff that we don't really know about, we tend to, I don't know, look down our nose at it, right? And in this case, Kathy just pitched her nose. Well, that was just a rabbit trail, wasn't it? So here's the thing that I'm trying to say. Sometimes when we grow to the point where we think that we're, top dog, and we get a little bit too big for our britches, we tend to look at others as being less than. Well, we do that, and we find ourselves in a real pickle. Now, one of the things that Bruner was talking about, he said, and so we look as subject to an object. Well, in philosophy, subject is the thing looking at a thing, and the object is the thing looking being looked at. So the subject would be us, looking at the world around us, looking and evaluating everyday life. And the object is that world we're looking at. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's animals that are wandering about, sometimes it's just kids in a park, you know? But we think we're the subject. And so we end up looking at the world. The problem is that we start evaluating it according to what? Most of the time, it's according to our own presuppositions and opinions. Let's read on with what Bruner's talking about. He goes on and says, to whom the whole world is object, the more does he tend to confuse himself with God, to confuse his spirit with the Spirit of God. And that becomes a major, major problem for human beings. The point is that we've been made by God. We're created. We are creatures. We are not the creator. But sometimes we tend to think that we're all that in a bag of chips, you know what I'm saying? And so we tend to look at this world and everything about this world, including God, who is not of this world, by the way. But we tend to look at God in light of ourselves. Whatever opinion we have about what is real, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, we tend to project onto everything else around us. When we begin to project ourselves as being the creator rather than the creature, we fall into a real conundrum of falsehoods. And that's one of the things that hits us, isn't it? When we start thinking about ourselves as being more important than others, when we believe that we are the end all and be all of this world, we are, after all, the top of the food chain. But is that necessarily true? I mean, if you were wandering about in Africa, I would dare say that you weren't top of the food chain, but that lion chasing you was. However, Bruner talks about not just looking at the world as an object, but looking at God as an object, and making the mistake of thinking that our spirit, our conscience, our mind, as being the Spirit of God, the conscience of God, the mind of God. That's a little bit weird, isn't it? I mean, when people start acting like they're God, and we talk about this when we talk about the police having a God complex or doctors having a God complex, we look at them and think, man, those folks right there, they think that they're too much. And they're not. They're not all that. And they don't have that kind of authority. They don't have the authority to determine what genuine life is. We look at daily life and we think that this is what's real. And because we haven't seen God or heard Him, or touched Him, felt Him, sat down, had dinner, we tend to think that maybe God doesn't exist. But the truth is, I believe, and I will qualify that because I am talking through faith. I believe God does exist. And because God does exist, I do believe that His Holy Spirit does exist. And I also believe that because God is a relational God, His Holy Spirit does speak to us. I believe that God constantly is in communication with us. But sometimes it's hard to talk to a person when that person thinks they already know. For you parents out there, does it or does it not drive you insane when you're talking with your teenager and trying to help them out with a problem that they've come to you about, and they say, I know that. Well, if you knew that, why are you coming and bothering me? Right? But we act that way with God sometimes. Emil Brunner is pointing out a problem that we as human beings have. We tend to stop realizing what is important and true and just focus on ourselves. When you do that, when all you're thinking about is yourself, what your needs are, what you believe to be the truth, then we stop understanding what really is happening all around us. I challenge you. Stop and take a look at what is really happening around you and appreciate who you are in this world, not what this world is to you. Well, I'm out of here. We'll see you later. It's been a pleasure. Talk to you tomorrow, okay? Bye-bye.